Hello, welcome to the Back to Mind podcast. My name is Koraj and I'm one half of the Positive Movement Project along with Terry. So with me, my focus is more so on mental health and the logistics and admin side of the company. So by doing all of that, it helps Terry be able to deliver the amazing sessions that she does. So the Back to Mind podcast is a part of the Back to Fit programme, which is supported by the Mayor of London's Stronger Communities Fund. And this kind of podcast is really kind of set up to help listeners to understand aspects of their mental health, elements of psychology, and hopefully feel positive by the end, which obviously is what the Positive Movement Project is all about, feeling good. So a little bit more about me. I am trained as an actor. I have been running kind of projects for at-risk people, young people, for example, for the last, how long now? Since 2013, really. So it's been a long time, and a lot of my work is being centered around using therapeutic approaches to help people either understand themselves a bit better or understand different perspectives. So in order to kind of benefit and improve their situations and their self-understanding, really. And currently at the moment, I am training to be a psychotherapist. So on top of all the stuff with the Positive Movement Project and Tell Be Told with Terry as well, I'm also training to be a therapist. So these podcasts will help kind of explore, some aspects that I've learned while on the job, essentially. Either models or way of working that I've done and the impact I've seen, as well as some of the learning that I've been doing whilst studying. So I'm only in my first year, but already there's so many kind of elements that are really crucial and quite important and has changed the way I think about things, which I think is really important for other people to be able to hear those as well and potentially be influenced by that. So that is a little bit about me. And kind of these podcasts will happen every week and they will have a slightly different focus. And some episodes I might have a guest in as well, talking about personal experiences and so on. So hopefully this will be an ongoing podcast after the funding is complete and, we can do our best to really try to support people, especially during the time of COVID and where things are a little bit tough, I have to say, considering how long it's lasting and and the separation from people is hard. And I know for myself, I have found myself in a really big rut at points last year, predominantly, during, kind of the first lockdown and so on. And it took me to kind of really try to put things in perspective and kind of make a plan of attack, really. And hence why I started to do my training, actually. It gave me the space to be able to go, right, what is it that I want to do next in my life? Because I had so much time on my hand to really think. And although overthinking is really a bad thing, but a little bit is very useful. So at least luckily that was one element of me kind of coping with kind of the restrictions in the first time around. So that was a little bit about me and the podcast. So in today's episode, we are looking at the PACE model. The PACE model was created by Daniel Hughes, who is a clinical psychologist. And it's really a attachment theory based model. So it's predominantly about parent and child. But I found that although I was taught this method as a way of working with young people, I found it incredibly useful to apply this technique to everyone, essentially, from other sort of adults in terms of a working relationship, in terms of friendships, and even myself, actually. The way I kind of started to process things for myself slightly changed and things started to become more clearer by using this model. So PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And essentially this model, goes into a bit of detail how by using all four of these elements, it can actually really benefit and change a relationship that you are with. Again, whether if that's a personal relationship, whether that's a work relationship, or whether that's a relationship with your child or so on. And this model really helps kind of allow both parties really to kind of express themselves a little bit clearer, their intentions, and be able to communicate through a way which, really helps benefit both of them, really. So rather than it being very one-sided and so on, there's a bit more focus to it, which is helpful. So going into that playfulness, so the P of pace, it's based on more so like the physical characterizations of yourself. So for example, and a lot of us actors do it, whether we're facilitating, and most teachers do as well, predominantly when they're in nursery or, primary school years. And it's something that I kind of wish they kind of kept doing when they went into secondary school and so on, because there's no limit to age here, even though, like I said, it's an attachment-based theory. So in theory, it's going to be more focused on child and parent in the early years. But like I said, it's beneficial to all. So, like I said, with the characterizations, it's the rhythm in which you talk, your movements, the use of laughter, your facial expressions, the variation in your voice, for example. It almost creates this like sing-song voice effect. So that's why, like with children, for example, like nursery, when really, 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 really young children with nursery rhymes, like, the words, the way that they're sung in a playful manner, and hence you can see directly straight away the excitement that it causes the young baby. So it's about how you use aspects of that, elements of that, to kind of use on people and on yourself predominantly, and the impact that has. So some of the benefits include, creating these emotions of joy, interest, excitement, happiness, and it's shared between the both people. So again, regardless whether that's you as a parent and the other as a child, or you as a husband, the other as a wife, vice versa, or you as a colleague, another as a colleague. So again, for example, me and Terry, very, very playful in the way that we communicate to one another. Even when things are getting slightly difficult, we still try our hardest to maintain that level. Because by doing that, it creates this kind of aspects of acceptance and openness to one another. And it focuses on the positive traits between those two people. So, for example, by having that kind of playfulness, you're more likely to go, oh wow, that person's really warm, that person's really friendly. Oh, they make me feel comfortable. They make me feel great. Rather than if someone was very monotone, very closed off, very quiet. Of course, then you would focus on the negative traits. So keeping it playful automatically makes you go, oh wow, to the other person. And it kind of helps develop this idea of, unconditional love. Obviously, it doesn't mean love in the sense of like, I love you, but it creates this kind of safety net where, you have that other person, regardless during the stressful moments and like moments of uncertainty, there's somebody there because of the way that they conduct themselves in this playful manner. And to go slightly off topic, with the word play, which I probably will expand on in another podcast because it runs quite through a lot of the work that I do, is play is such an important aspect of dealing with the everyday. It provides you with an opportunity that by being playful, if something went wrong, you're instantly able to cope with it, react, and move through it. So hence why with children, like we look at them, you see a child playing, you see groups of children playing together and so on. You see if there's something which goes slightly wrong, you can see how all of them respond. Just so if you have children around you, it's really interesting to watch when, just observing it. How does a young person, a child, just respond by being playful and going through a problem? So sadly, something that we deal with in life is when we grow up, we're expected rather, to be, oh, you're an adult now, you have to think a certain way, you have to behave a certain way. It's not acceptable for you to be this kind of playful, oh, you're acting like a child, grow up. And sadly, by doing that, it kind of makes us very, like, what's the best way to say it? Sorry, the word's gone out of my head, but it kind of makes you think, okay, I can only be this certain way, things have to go a certain way, I have to follow the trend, these are the norms which are being set up by everybody. And by that, it almost creates this right and wrong. So essentially when something goes wrong, you're more likely to go, what do I do? And be more fixated that something's gone wrong. And the fact that you don't know how to respond to it because clearly you don't have the right tools to at that moment, it just really fixates on the kind of negative. So that's why a lot of the work that I've been doing is kind of enhancing this aspect of play. And it's not going, oh, you played like a child, or, you're being really young, you're being like a baby. It's about actually going, it's about keeping an open mind. And actually, by keeping that open mind, your relationships with other people and even yourself increases by being playful. So going back into it, kind of back to the playfulness, to help develop it, it's, a lot of it is using laughter and humour, obviously within reason. Just because you might find something funny doesn't necessarily mean that the other person will find it funny. So it's about finding that balance as well. And is it actually appropriate for that time? So, but trying your hardest when possible to keep it light. So I remember when I was originally trained to use this model, I was panicking. I was like, what do you mean I have to be playful all the time? And I was like, what about if someone discloses something which is actually quite traumatic? And it was like, no, you're not using laughter and humour to while that person's talking to you, but it's that aspect of an open mind is by keeping it playful. And another thing with being able to develop playfulness is this term mistakes. I think all of us at points have kind of been drilled into this idea when something goes wrong, we are incredibly hard on ourselves. I know that's been one of my biggest problems. And during my training, actually, it's something which is being drilled out of me in a way. And it's this kind of, and again, I think this is to do with the whole thing kind of growing up and this aspect of losing playfulness is this idea of you have to get it right. So rather than going, oh, I'm wrong, everything's wrong, everything's, it's, you kind of admit mistakes. One thing I like to say as well while being playful is not necessarily to go, I've made the biggest mistake of my life, blah, 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 blah. It's about going, it's classing it as a retake. Take what you need to learn from it and move on. Go, okay, that didn't quite go to plan, but I learned this. Let's try it again now that I've learned that. And I think if you rephrase, I think I'll probably do an element of this in a future podcast, is this idea of the rephrasing words, actually. So rather than focusing on negatives like mistake, go, okay, learning opportunity, And so again, that's about being playful. It's about going, okay, that didn't go quite right, but what did I learn from it? Let's move forward, So that's playfulness. And I think playfulness is such an important aspect of life. And sadly, I think, like I said, we have it so innate to be playful, but then society drills it out of us. And I think that's why so many people struggle. And by redeveloping aspects of that, it gives you such a sense of confidence to go, okay, I can deal with this. So really, 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 I would suggest looking into those ideas of, play a lot more. And like I said, it's not just about, hi, today I'm pretending to be a Thomas Tank Engine sort of character. Even though if that's what you want to do, you can do that. But, there's so much more to it. So moving now on to acceptance, so the second letter. And this, I think, is really, really super important. So this is the idea of going, so say if someone's done something not quite right, it's about putting the focus on that behaviour rather than criticising the person themselves. And this is something which it takes a lot of training to do, I have to say, because naturally when someone does something which is wrong or upsetting, it's it is natural to get angry and so on and be like, why did you do that? Blah, 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 blah. But actually it's going, so like an example that I use is, and it's actually happened multiple times in my work. It's like, for example, a young person launching a chair across the room. So easy to yell out, get out, shout at them, what are you doing? And I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times where like a teacher's gone off to them, or like even within a parent, actually, you've seen a parent just shout at a child, and it's actually going, okay, you threw the chair, and yeah, you can be angry at that element of the chair, but try to separate the behaviour from the person. So actually, if you go to the person going, okay, you threw that chair, well, what kind of happened before that happened, before the moment you threw the chair. And it makes the person kind of be able to actually express themselves a lot better. And a lot of time you get an understanding. Because with acceptance with behaviour as well, I find that in that moment, even though, like I said, it's not sometimes the greatest behaviour choice, or action which is chosen, but it's it often represents that's their best effort at the time. So, for example, like I said, with the person throwing the chair, it could be a case of someone was really upsetting that person. They didn't have the capability or the knowledge or the know-how to go, okay, I'm getting really upset right now. I don't know what to do. So instead, it becomes a physical response. So, i.e., throwing the chair across the room. So by being able to break the behavior away from the person and just putting the judgment onto the behavior, not the person going, look, I didn't really accept that was, that wasn't the greatest choice to be made, but I can understand why you were angry in the first place. And I get, and it's not a nice feeling. That acceptance is so much more powerful. And this is not just like a young person example, this is to everyone and yourself as well. If you're able to go, okay, I'm still a decent human being, I'm still a great person, I didn't make the greatest choice, it really kind of makes you start looking at things differently, because it's such a natural thing to, when you just shout at someone going, oh, you're always angry, you're just throwing things around, it just makes them feel, just not particularly well loved, and it's one of those, and you start to believe it. You're like, I'm not a good person, no one likes me, and so on. And like I said, that comes in every aspect of life, and it's not just as a child, and it's not always anger related either. Just really about separating those behaviors from the person. So by doing that, you're more able to create this safety net where the person can actually express themselves, because you're not threatening your relationship to them, and like again to yourself as well. So say for example, going back to kind of my example, I was a person which was incredibly hard on myself. If I made a mistake, I was really bad. Like the best way to describe it was in one of my kind of sessions that I was talking to my kind of the other years really, was how when I did something wrong, it was this very aggressive voice which almost was in my head, which would be like, you're not good enough, I told you you'd make a mistake. And it was almost like equivalent of someone shouting at my face, but it was me. And essentially that was me not accepting myself. So by doing that, it just became a point where I almost was beating myself up. And then, self-fulfilling prophecy, you tell yourself long enough you're not good enough, you ultimately fall down that hole, and your relationship starts getting affected and so on. So if you try to really separate any mistakes that you make from yourself as a person, go, okay, that was what, again, like I said, wasn't the best moment, that wasn't the best choice, but this is how I was feeling. I can now understand why I was feeling like that. Okay, how can I do something differently about that next time? And it becomes a learning opportunity by doing that. So the next thing up, so that's acceptance. So that was took a very long time to go through that, but I do think it's very important. So letter 3, curiosity. So this is like a little question thing that I normally always ask people. When a person is curious, you become. So have a moment. What do you think that means? So when a person is curious, you become. And then the next one I'm going to ask is, oh no, going back to that. So let's add an example. So when a person is curious, you become excited. Okay, so for example, if someone asks you, what's your favorite film? What's your favorite book? You're more likely to go, oh wow, yeah. So my favorite film, a Marvel film, let's just say Avengers and so on. Oh yeah, my favorite part in this was, this scene. You notice how very quick when someone asks a question, both people more normally lights up. You can see it in their face, facial expressions, their body language. You see that they're looking towards you, eye contact, they're facing you, they're actually listening. They want to know what you're thinking. So for me, curiosity is a very good way to explore, everything around you essentially, but it's been a bit more targeted. So for example, you might ask certain questions. I know for myself, for example, like going back to if someone's made an incident in the past, a young person in a workshop or a session, I've asked, I've asked questions. I was like, what was happening before that incident, for example. So asking those sort of questions really helps to raise that curiosity and cause an interaction where you're more likely to understand one another. Also with curiosity, you find as well there is almost like a, there's like you're opening yourself up to really being influenced by the other person, to understand them. And it's not, so it can't be like shallow curiosity. You can't be like, oh, tell me what you think, but I don't really care because I already know what I think, because it doesn't quite work. Those questions become very hollow in that sense. And I think the other person can tell quite quick if you're not really interested in understanding their point of view and so on. So by really, truly listening to that person's response, and the intention to actually just understand where they're coming from is very important, and being allowed to be influenced by that as well. So some of these questions that you can ask is like, how does that seem to you? What does that mean to you? What do you think? What do you want to happen? What do you think about that? What do you think makes that important to you? If you do that, what do you expect to happen next? I think I understand why you want to do that. Any reason for not doing it? So if you notice, if you ask certain questions like that, it just really opens up the conversation, essentially. It allows people to explore their behaviours, explore their choices, in a less aggressive way. So for example, with curiosity, I always try my hardest to avoid using the word why. Why is really outlawed. It took me a while to do that because I didn't realise how much I use the word why. But why implies there's a right or wrong answer. And then say if you ask somebody, why did you do that? It also implies whose answer is the correct one. Is it their why? Is it their yes or no answer, right or wrong answer? Or is it your right or wrong answer? There's too many, rather than actually just hearing what happened, you're providing like, tell me the answer now sort of environment. So that's why is a no-no for me. But with curiosity, it's kind of really, it's just, it's interesting when you open that conversation up, that dialogue. So I always say with people as well is, so for example, with yourself, I find myself asking myself at points. So say, this is a really good one actually. Say if you are working with somebody and you find that just seeing that person creates this kind of feeling in you of a bit of anger or so on. And rather than just ignoring it or just going, oh, I'm just going to avoid that person at all costs, by actually going, I wonder what it is which is making me feel like this about that person, gives you a chance to actually explore what that is. So that's why I think curiosity is a very important aspect of this model, actually, and understanding yourself. So going back to it, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Back to it. So the final letter in this word is E, which is empathy. And empathy, I think, is the single most important thing in life. And empathy is, it's conveyed in both non-verbal and verbal expressions. You can feel when someone's been showing empathy. There's a general closeness that you feel from a person. That's what makes you comfortable in order to share, to talk, and so on. But also things with empathy, I think, is really important. That it's not about rescuing a person from their situation. I think it's very natural for us to sometimes go into a situation where someone's telling us, it's like, oh, I think you should do this, I think you should do that, this is what you should do. Because if you do that, and that can also cause a barrier, because it might give them, oh, I can't do that, or they try that and it doesn't work, it puts strain on the relationship. So rather than going, hey, I think you should do it, it's about going, all right, just talk to me about it. It's about providing them the ability to talk, and feel like they're using you as a soundboard, essentially. So it's not saying that you can't say, you can't offer any suggestions, but it's not about just single-handedly going, I'm going to take you out of this problem, I'm going to save you. So it's about conveying that you are with them, and that actually they are able to cope with a situation, even though it might be hard. So, all of us have the capability of getting ourselves through any issues that we have. We all have it. It's just not everyone might necessarily can think of that answer straight away. So by letting them talk, by being curious, by exploring those different elements, they're able to, oh, cool, I can do this, and so on. I found that this model has been really particularly effective with just exploring my relationships. Like I said, again, work, personal, and myself, by being playful, by being using aspects of acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. You're just more likely to be able to delve into your behaviors, into your relationships and just go, okay, I wonder what it is which makes me feel like this, and then explore it rather than ignoring what might be happening, whether it's a good thing or a negative thing, and then let it, you know, I think it's very quick to forget that we're in control of our own behaviours, essentially. We can't really control other people's, but we're in control of ours. So like I said, if we can look into why we behave a certain way and react in a certain way, it just gives us so much more power to understand our inner worlds. And that's what is able to push us forward, essentially, is when we're able to start piecing our own little mini puzzles. Because by understanding ourselves, we're more likely to understand the impact and effect that we have on other people. So that's a whole different concept. So I'm not going to go into that too into detail now, but it's called role theory. And it's based on the different roles we have in life and in society. It's essentially like a role, like in a play. Life is a play. It's a stage. We all have roles within it, and it's how we impact and interact with these roles, and whether we're suited for the role, whether we know the right techniques and so on. So this PACE model helps us to explore those aspects. Without it, you know, our relationships with ourselves, with other people, without the restrictions, without the kind of everything's going to go wrong, it creates a safety net. So I just want you to really think about afterwards, start exploring some of these kind of aspects of yourself. Try to be playful, try to be accepting when something doesn't quite go right, but it also can be accepting of things when they do go right. It doesn't always have to be based on negative or positive experiences. And being curious and showing empathy, really just explore those elements, and you find afterwards there's a general change in the way you interact with people. It is amazing, actually. It takes a bit of practicing. It doesn't just happen overnight. But I do highly recommend reading into it a little bit more. So yeah, give it a go with the people around you, even if that has to be online or over the phone. Just have a go with the PACE model with the people around and just see how it goes. See how your interactions, do they change at all? And the final activity I would like to give you, a little challenge in the meantime, is I just want you to have a moment to reflect on a moment in time where you felt really supported, and outline what it was which made you feel like that, how made you feel supported. So thinking about how the other person was being, and just have a little note, just jot that down, and feel free to share that with us. So that is it for the podcast today. And just to say, yeah, this is our first episode. We would like to hear how you have found it. You know, we're always looking to improve what we do and what we can offer. So if there's any way that we could improve that, do give us a shout. But I do hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully it wasn't too long. I do aim for them to be shorter. So in future, hopefully I won't go past the 30-minute mark. But thank you so much for listening. And my name's Coraj, and this was the Back to Mind podcast for the Positive Movement Project. See you next week.